Good afternoon, Upper Six. So here we are, bullet point 4, global music recording and distribution businesses. We've talked about retail. We've moved on from that. We're not so much talking about that distribution side of it. It's the recording, it's the physical, getting it onto the vinyl or onto the streaming service that we're going to talk about here. So it's the recording labels. And the recording labels are a bit like, I don't know, they're like book publishers in some ways. They might identify some talent, they might nurture them, they might promote them, and then they take obviously their top slice and commission as you would expect. So we'll look through those. We know that the market is dominated by the top three, and there's thousands of independent labels out there as well, and I presume some of those are run from people's bedrooms. So we're going to look at this case study. So pause the video, read the case study. It's on Universal. We've got Universal coming in next week. Thank you in advance to Hallam. And they're going to talk about the research bullet points and obviously some of the stars and distribution and stuff like that. This helps us with that interview with them. So there's a 20 marker here to consider. And when we're thinking about this oligopoly, there are three major players that control, well, the majority of this industry, and thousands of independents that are trying to make a living. We're thinking about Porter's 5 forces. This is using Porter's generic strategies, or as per the A-level spec, Porter's generic matrix, which freaks people out when people get the question because we get it confused with Ansough's matrix, but get used to it. It's Porter's generic matrix in the A-level standards, and I apologise for the strategies. So looking at this question, to achieve its aim of increasing market share, so straight into an aim, which is normally the hook, isn't it? Well, if they repeat it twice, or repeat it once, then it is the hook, isn't it? So in the global music industry, Universal Music Group, or UMG, is how I would write about this in my essay, they could either invest in signing and developing new artists, so a differentiation strategy, bring some new talent in, or launch an international marketing campaign for for some of its existing global stars. So we could do a bit of cost leadership in there. We could talk about this as differentiation if they're not already that sort of music in the marketplace. So evaluate these two options using Porter's generic strategies and recommend which one is most suitable for Universal Music Group to achieve its aim of increasing market share. Who would have thought? So we know what the hook is. Market share. We know how we acquire market share. We either get people to listen to our music that have never listened to music before, or we take market share away from our competitors. So when we're going through this video, think about this aim of increasing market share, think about Universal Music Group and some of their amazing stars, and maybe some of the differences between the big recording companies and the indies to do with how long they tie people into contracts and stuff like that. So we'll explore that in this revision video. So yes, the industry has changed, but look at these massive growth figures up here, which I've lifted from one of those PDF reports that I asked you to look at in the first video. So, you know, you've got 19.4% Latin America, growth in Mexico. If only there was an acronym to do with emerging markets that Mexico was part of, and growth in Brazil. I wonder if there's another acronym to do with emerging markets that has Brazil in it. So we can bring in this little bit of extra knowledge. It's the first unit we do in the upper sixth with theme 4, and there's lots that we can do with this. Rising middle classes, more disposable income, therefore buying more music. Maybe they want a taste of America. Maybe they want to listen to some of the Brit pop. Maybe they want to listen to their own music, and this is an opportunity for recording companies to sign up new Brazilian acts, for example. So it used to be in the past dominated by the US and the UK, but not so much now, thankfully. and there's more diversity in the product portfolio. And remember the regiocentric global marketing strategy. It could be that we focus on Latin America as a market, even though you must remember Latin America, growth in Mexico, growth in Brazil. Brazil has a Portuguese heritage. We've done that when we did the Taco Bell case study in class the other day. So yes, it's growing massively, and we need to think about other regions as well that are also growing. So South Korea is a big consumer of paid for music, as are the emerging markets on the continent of Africa. So here's our top 10 consumption markets for music, and 1 and 2 totally different marketplaces, even though there might be some similarities for those geocentric branded bands, for example. The US and the UK, relatively similar cultures, slightly different taste, not much really, other than we don't like country music, hopefully. And then we see the big players in there with Germany. Now, when we go on to looking at streaming services, this is a distribution bullet point. You'll notice that there, for instance, one of the big global players is a German streaming service. China have got a couple, France have got Deezer. So there's lots of stuff out there we should consider when we're looking at global markets and not just the markets that you've heard of. You can see the stats of changing tastes, and there are lots more global artists out there, and it's not so much UK stars anymore, as we've discovered in previous videos. So if we're thinking about one of these country-based questions, which I mentioned in a previous video, we're thinking about circular flow of income, we're thinking about investing in an economy, we're thinking about components of GDP, macroeconomic objectives, all of those sorts of things. And should the UK government invest in the music recording industry, for example, with brilliant studios, famous studios because of the Beatles, Abbey Road and stuff like that. So maybe they should. If we look at the car industry, we keep looking at the car industry in class, and we go back to Nissan Leaf, where the government gave them 300 million quid as a golden handshake and didn't charge them any tax for 10 years. Well, that's because we needed them to come to us and not to France. And Sunderland is a brighter, sunnier and happier place because of it. So if you think about this from the music industry, this is a massive global industry. We're really good in the movie industry. We give tax breaks to the movie industry, but not so much to the music industry. So you've got some of the top destinations for music recording there, not all of them, and thought put Leeds in there, which is quite good, a good history there, emerging artists. But if we were to focus on London, we've got huge amounts of music industry in there, and there's other things that are going on in London. So if we think about London's music scene there, we've got some stats in there accounting for 30.1% of live music venues in the UK. We've got Coldplay, Beyonce, Elton John. This has increased. Music exports have reached £4.6 billion. That's a massive number. Come on, Labour government, invest some money in the music industry. And we're thinking about, should the UK government invest in the music industry? Circular flow of income, focus on the local economy, focus on the national economy, and same as the Pfizer Ireland question, but from a different context. Very easy, as long as you use the context. So if we think about these record labels, they're sort of publishers. They're like books, really. And they will find a new artist, same as J.K. Rowling once upon a time, and then they will develop them, they will market them, they will clearly take a chunk of their revenue. We saw how little revenue is passed on from companies like Spotify to performing artists. Well, now imagine the record label is going to take a slice of that as well. If we look at Universal Group, we can see that you've got a few of the artists in there, and yes, there's a huge amount of revenue that goes into this company. Now think about the power of that. Now Spotify need artists, artists need Spotify. Hopefully there's this symbiotic relationship between them. But you imagine if Universal control the majority of these well-known artists, that gives them more buying power. We would be quite naive to think that Universal haven't got a special deal with Spotify and Apple. You've got that Porter's Five Forces buying power there. Okay, so I'm thinking they probably get a bit of a better deal. I might be wrong, but be naive to think that they haven't negotiated that. Now, if we're thinking about the record labels, obviously we've got Universal in there. I'm going to sing their applause because, you know, they're coming in next week. Why would we not? There's some lovely photos there. And they're investing in their artists. This is developing future talent. This is making sure that Harry Styles has still got a career. So it's all those sorts of things. They're promoting, they're developing. Some of these will be at cash cow stage, some of these will be rising stars, some of these will be dogs. Think of this as a product portfolio, a Boston Matrix style question. You'll have different artists at different stages of the product life cycle, and therefore there might be different marketing strategies. Even good old Robbie Williams came back recently because of his movie after a relatively disastrous end to his previous career. The guy still earns a lot more money than me, clearly, but you know, not as anywhere near as high as that 70-80 million pound deal that he got. So lots of hands-on support. We've got the in-house teams. You've got your economies of scale there in some ways, because the more recording artists that they're used to supporting, well, you've got best practice going on, where some of the small indie labels run from someone's bedroom may not have the historic expertise in-house. Obviously, multiple revenue streams here, not only from different parts of the product life cycle with those rising stars, cash cows, etc., but also lots of merchandise, concerts, and look at the wonderful concerts that we've talked about before. And also think of the surge pricing that's out there, more like premium pricing for lots of these concerts where they know they can get away with charging a premium price, so they do. And look at the issues we had with Oasis recently, with sitting in a queue for 4 hours and then they turn around and say your 50 quid ticket is now 200, and the bad feeling that that created. But at least they said sorry. Don't think they've refunded anyone's money though. So we're thinking about the major label focus here, and they've got to get the return on investment, so they focus on those that will be big. Whereas the independents might be a little bit more niche, and they're focusing on the niche and the cultural, and maybe that thousands and thousands of indie labels have all got a slightly different market position. They've got different priorities. These big recording labels have got shareholders, they want return on investment, and therefore if you're not giving them return on investment, adios amigos, and you are off. Independent labels, there's a big difference in focus. So this is a horrible slide, I do apologise, but there's some interesting things in here. So if we look at the contracts, for example, well, the major recording labels, they will want Taylor Swift to be with them for many years. Here's a multiple album deal, all the marketing that goes into it and the concerts and everything else in that product portfolio. Whereas the indie labels might be a lot shorter, they're more flexible contracts. And remember, a contract is offered and accepted by two separate parties. So we need to think about, why is this flexible? Well, the indie record labels might not want to commit to multiple album deals because they're dealing with more niche, and therefore it might be harder to predict future sales. We can bring in our questioning the reliability of sales forecasting data. So it's sensible in some ways not to lock people into long contracts. However, if they suddenly become megastars over the internet, then maybe people jump ship and they go to Universal, where they've got the more reliable source of support and income and investment and yada yada. We can see the revenue split here is a bit different as well. It might be that the power of Universal, they say, look, we're going to spend a lot more money on you, a lot more developing on you. You're going to earn a bucket load more money with us if you're successful. And these guys might need to pay 70% to get people just to sign up with them. Okay, so you have to think about why they are doing this. You know, why is money more important? Well, it's because the indie labels may not have the reputation of the major labels. The major labels can get away with it. Maybe 40% of a lot of money is a lot less than 70% of not a lot of money. I know that makes sense, but common sense. You can pause that screen and look through the rest for some of those comparisons. I've not put this together. I've copied it from someone who copied it from someone else. So multinational record labels, we've got the majors. We've seen this diagram before, and we can see that Universal are out in front with a 32% market share. This is amazing. However, included in that are also subsidiaries. And we've talked about those multinationals that have got a number of subsidiaries, and they might specialise in certain areas of the market. And that means it gives the record label, the subsidiary record label, the focus on a target market. That helps them differentiate. Maybe it all goes into Universal's coffers and hopefully goes through to their shareholders through dividends. Now, if we think about those indie labels, there's thousands and thousands of them around the world, and you've literally got people, because of the evolutions in technology, it's cheaper to get this sort of stuff and get a home recording studio. There's going to be loads of these small DIY recording labels in people's homes, but we can see where the power is. The power in the marketplace is with these oligopolies. Now, if we think about this, this is a wonderful graphic that I've stolen off the internet. We can look at the market share. 2011, 2012 saw the demise of EMI, which were just gobbled up by the other multinational corporations. And we can see that independents are sort of in there, but there's thousands of them. And I can't tell you the individual market share without more research. But we need to think about the power of these three main players in the industry. It's really, really important when we're thinking about their influence. If they call up, I don't know, the equivalent of Top of the Pops and say, we want to get one of our people on there, well, I think they're going to be listened to. If one of the 15,000 independents say, can we go on the equivalent of what used to be Top of the Pops? Well, no. Yeah? So, you know, when we're talking about Heart FM, for example, which is something my dog listens to, you know, when they're interviewing one of these top pop stars, then it's going to be there straight away when they're talking about a new album release. It's a lot harder to get niche market music acts onto mass market channels, and this will impact how many records they sell. So market control, this is the typical thing from the textbook, but in context. They've got control over the market. They can pick up the phone, they can get the attention, hopefully, of people. The artists want to be signed by these big labels. Now, those that are just doing it for the love of it, remember, this might turn into money. And if they think they can make more money out of the big multinationals like Sony, for example, then guess who they're going to try and sign up with, even if the indie labels are going to be paying them a higher percentage royalty fee. Pricing power, yes, they can probably phone up the social media channels and get a higher percentage on views, and the Spotifys of this world, and get a better rate than I've put on previous videos, because they've got that power. and also they've got the whole portfolio that's behind them. But nowadays, the power is shifting towards these streaming channels, okay? Yes, some of these are exclusive signups for certain streaming channels, but we need to understand that, companies like Universal are going to have that power of the seller because they've got this portfolio. It's a bit like Tesco's when they were arguing with Unilever, and they threatened to pull all their products off the shelves. Well, Tesco's need links on their shelves and Dove Cosmetics and Bird's Eye Fish Fingers. Well, Spotify need the artists that are signed up to these massive recording companies. They can influence industry trends because they throw so much money and power at advertising, and this can influence consumption patterns. Yes, there's competitive barriers because they're so big. They've got so much resource, so much power, so much influence in the industry. For me to start up a recording label in my shed is probably going to be more of a hobby than a business. But you never know what's going to happen in the future. We understand about streaming influence. They're going to have lots of power again, and clearly they're going to get a lot of money coming into a central resource, which means they've got money to develop future talent. So the 20 marker that we put at the beginning of the video says, should they develop new talent or should they promote existing talent? Well, let's face it, they're going to do both. Not that that's the question. You can't put that in your answer. You've got to choose one. But yeah, however, in the future might be a little bit of doing a bit of both. In reality, they would do a bit of both. They understand the different product life cycles that are out there, and therefore it's really important to have your new talent coming through the pipeline as well as your existing cash cow talent out there as well. And hopefully that dog talent that's out there is, you're not advertising it, are you? So you're making a load of money off of it if it is selling. Yeah. Fleetwood Mac Rumours was the #1 vinyl album that was on Amazon when I looked. Nobody advertises that anymore. Very profitable. And quick link into Porter's 5 Forces, which I know you know and love. So here's some finance. We can see that yes, things change over time, and if I was to guess, there's a bit of power relationship going on between these two top players, but this is a very profitable business. You can do the percentage of profit from the figures you see there, and it's a big chunk. This is very good. We've compared this to independent retailers. We looked at some of the multi-chain retailers like HMV on about 3%. And then we compared that to supermarkets. These guys are not supermarkets. Look at their margins. This is just beautiful. And we know that the streaming services are dominated by Spotify. But remember, you are learning the A-level business in the UK. And generally, no offence to you, you don't know what's going on outside of the UK. And we've got some major players in China, okay? And we need to think about that. We've got Germany, we've got France, and there's a big other category which I've no idea what's in there. Spotify are mainly worried about Apple, Amazon, YouTube. Yeah, they're a Western brand at the moment, growing into emerging markets in Asia. So yes, they're going to be aware of the Chinese streaming, especially Tencent, which are massive, but really they're worried about Apple, Amazon and YouTube. But if you combine Apple, Amazon and YouTube's market share, it's roughly the same as Spotify. They've got more market share than all three of those combined, and all the benefits that go along with that, including the profits that they're now making this year. Apple are doing this as part of their product portfolio. Amazon are doing this as part of theirs. YouTube do really well for what they do, but they're not just focused on music. Spotify, one trick pony, doing it really bloody well at the moment. And all the doubters, well, There you go, they're now making profit, hey? Let's see what happens in the future. Now, notes on these streaming services, a couple of pictures there to illustrate. We need to think of Yandex Russian, which has obviously come out of the Ukrainian war, where the Russians have just decided to copy everything, which is fine. You know, Deezer French, and it's comparable to Spotify and Apple for choice of music. Again, Chinese, really social media led, but leading, you know, obviously lots of music there. Mentioned Tencent already, and we're back to the 20 marker. Now we know the hook is most suitable for Universal Group to achieve its aim of increasing its market share. Now that might be market share in existing markets, that might be in new markets, not new market in Suffolk obviously, and it might be, you know, new customers that didn't buy their stuff before. It could be stealing customers from competitors. So there's lots here that I'm going to shove up on the screen for you. You wouldn't use all of it. I would encourage you to write your own answer to this question. Try and drop in some language of Porter's generic matrix, not strategies. I do apologise. And we've got some pros there. So it's a unique proposition, new artists. They might be bringing in new artists to cope with the new trends, for example. Long-term revenue, short-term, just visualise the product life cycle. Just because you've got someone out in the market doesn't mean they're instantly famous overnight, if only. You've got this long-term pipeline. You've got artists at multiple stages in the product life cycle, and hopefully overall you make money. We've got regional expansion. This is really important because we've got globalization going, and we've got possibly the need for that regional focus of music to take advantage of these emerging markets. Really important. However, high financial risk. Think about Ansoff's language of risk to do with new in an existing market. It's probably higher risk than encouraging your existing people that you've got on the books. It's time intensive. Again, that temporal argument over time. Will this pay off in the future? And you're going to be spending a lot of money on marketing because they are new. You need to get the audience, the consumers of music, to want to listen to them, then stream, hopefully buy the vinyl with the pretty stuff that goes along with it. If we're thinking about launching into it, we've got that immediate, I hate that word, but never mind, revenue growth, because you've got existing fans out there. They go, yay, this is great, another one from Adele, let me buy her album. Economies of scale, because you're already out there. You know, you're already marketing, you've already got the stuff that's out there, the brand awareness. You might not need to spend as much money on marketing existing stars compared to brand new ones where you need to persuade me that I want to listen to them. And we could enhance that Taylor Swift brand loyalty. And there we go, you can read the rest. Market saturation because people are bored of it. It depends on the artist's performance. Let's hope we don't have another scandal in the performing arts industry. Sometimes companies have spent a load of money on performing artists and suddenly they do something stupid, don't they, Kevin Spacey? And wrong industry, I do apologise, he's never known for singing. But all of those sorts of things are quite important in this high profile industry. Hopefully that was useful. Another long video, I do apologise. But review your notes. The next one's entrepreneurialism, which I will do tomorrow or something. Thank you very much for your time. Hopefully it's useful. Don't put anything in the comments because I've turned them off.